let's jump into our first story, and this is going to be pretty dense.
Yeah.
It's a lot to cover here, so I want to bring up, add this to our stream, a salute to our fallen Chicago police officer, French, and I'm going to share what CBS Chicago reported today because they did catch the shooters. Now, this is from CBS Chicago. The two brothers charged in connection with the fatal shooting of Chicago police officer Ella French and critically wounding another officer over the weekend were ordered held without bond today. Emonte Morgan, 21, and Eric Morgan, 22, appeared at separate bond hearings on Tuesday, and both were denied bail. Emonte Morgan, also known as Monte Morgan, is charged with 1 count of first-degree murder of a peace officer, 2 counts of attempted first-degree murder of a peace officer, 1 count of aggravated unlawful use of a weapon, and 1 count of unlawful use of a weapon by a felon. His brother Eric Morgan is charged with aggravated unlawful use of a weapon, unlawful use of a weapon by a felon, and obstruction of justice, accused of trying to dispose of a murder weapon, before he was detained by a group of civilians not far from the scene of the shooting. At the time of the shooting, Emonte Morgan was on probation after pleading guilty to a 2019 robbery charge. Eric Morgan also was on probation for a theft conviction in Wisconsin, according to prosecutors. At both bond hearings on Tuesday, Cook County prosecutors said French and 2 other officers were on patrol in a marked squad car around 9 p.m. Saturday when they pulled over a gray SUV with expired plates near 63rd and Bell. Now, I want to add to this story from everything that I've read in the news. The police cams confirmed everything as far as the accounting of what went down. And these officers were doing everything we ask and expect officers to do in de-escalating a situation, which is the real tragedy of this, because you had a group of really good officers out there doing their jobs before this tragedy occurred. Prosecutors said Eric Morgan was driving the SUV while Emonte Morgan was in the back seat and a woman was in the front passenger seat. There was open alcohol in the vehicle, and the woman was not wearing a seatbelt. After pulling over the SUV, all 3 officers walked up to the vehicle, and French approached the driver, taking away his car keys. Prosecutors said Eric Morgan admitted to having marijuana in his possession, and French had him get out of the car. Meantime, one of French's partners approached the woman in the front passenger seat, while her other approached Emonte Morgan in the back seat and asked both of them to get out of the vehicle. Emonte Morgan stepped out with a drink in one hand and cell phone in the other. He refused to put them down and jerked his arms away from officers, according to prosecutors. After initially cooperating with French, Eric Morgan ran off, and one of her partners started to chase him while Emonte Morgan began to struggle with French and her other partner, according to prosecutors. Prosecutors said body camera footage showed a semi-automatic handgun in Emonte Morgan's waistband as he struggled with officers outside the SUV. The struggle then moved to the open front passenger door, where French's partner yelled at him to show his hands while he was partially inside the SUV as French tried to assist. While both French and her partner still had their service weapons holstered, Emonte Morgan fired several shots, hitting French and her partner, who both fell to the ground. Their body cameras recorded Emonte Morgan emerging from the SUV with a gun in his left hand, according to prosecutors. He could then be seen stepping over the wounded officers before moving off camera. That had to be chilling to see from that perspective, the police officers' body cams, this guy just walking over them the way he did. Meantime, the 3rd officer who had been chasing Eric Morgan heard the gunshots, and when he didn't hear his partners over the radio, he stopped trying to handcuff Eric Morgan and ran back to the SUV, radioing for help. The 3rd officer spotted Emonte Morgan, who fired at him from the back of the SUV. That officer returned fire and fell to the ground, prosecutors said. When he stood back up, he saw Emonte and Eric Morgan meet up across the street and run away. The officer fired at Emonte Morgan again, shooting him in the abdomen. Prosecutors said Emonte Morgan handed the gun to his brother, who ran off before he was detained by witnesses who caught him in a nearby yard where he had dumped the gun. Several officers responded to the scene and put French and her wounded partner into squad cars to bring them to the hospital, prosecutors said. Other officers canvassed the area and found Emonte Morgan lying on the ground. His brother was found not far away, where civilians had detained him. Police also found a .22 caliber handgun in the backyard where Eric Morgan was detained. French later died of a gunshot wound to the back of the head. Her wounded partner, a 39-year-old male officer, remains in critical condition with a gunshot wound to the eye and a bullet still lodged in his brain, according to prosecutors. Meantime, Amonte Morgan remains hospitalized at Advocate Christ Medical Center. His next court hearing is scheduled for August 16th. Another individual, Jamal Donzi, 29, has been charged by the U.S. Attorney's Office with federal firearm violations. He's accused of buying the weapon used in the shooting and then providing the gun Eric Morgan, who Donzi knew was a felon and not allowed to buy a weapon himself. Meanwhile, on Monday night, there was also a huge show of support for fallen Officer French, with dozens of police officers in attendance. Chicago police officer Erica Hernandez, who was a friend of French's and her former partner on the force, she led a balloon release for French along with the CPD's chaplain. She did this job because she wanted to make a difference. She was confident, fearless, a little crazy, but that girl was absolutely courageous, Hernandez told CBS 2's Charlie DeMar. Hernandez was especially pleased with the turnout at the balloon release. There are so many officers from different districts. She said, it's a blessing to see so many people for Ella. Hernandez and French both came into the force within months of one another and shared the unbreakable link of being female police officers. We all have a bond, Hernandez said. We are each other's girls. That's an accounting for what happened from the body cams as reported by CBS Chicago. Now, these details come from the Chicago Tribune. I told you it was going to be a little bit dense before we start talking about this. And I'm paraphrasing from the Chicago Tribune article, which was provided by Megan Crepeau, Jeremy Gorner, and Gregory Platt. So, French, 29, an officer since April of 2018, was the first Chicago cop to be shot and killed in the line of duty since Mayor Lightfoot took office in 2019, and the first since Police Superintendent David Brown began leading the city's police force last year. Her killing rattled a city already struggling with violence this summer. The brothers have little in the way of serious criminal backgrounds, though both were on probation for separate cases at the time of the shooting. Amonte Morgan pled guilty to a robbery in Cook County Court last year, and Eric Morgan pleaded guilty to theft in Dane County, Wisconsin, records show. Speaking at a news conference Monday where the charges were announced, Police Superintendent David Brown said the wounded officer is incrementally improving from Saturday night's tragic events. I think that the people of Chicago need to pray, not only for the recovery of our officer who's fighting for his life, but also for other officers on the street doing the job, Brown said, lamenting that he called low support for the police from the public and members of the media who often focus on police reform issues and not acts of heroism. It's past time to stop this, imbalanced treatment of police officers here in Chicago and everywhere in this country, Brown said. We're flawed, just like the media gallery is flawed, just like every profession in our country is flawed. But they go down dark alleys none of you would go down to protect you, he said. The suspect's vehicle was curbed because of expired plates, but investigators haven't yet established a motive for the shooting. Brown also said the woman who was with the Morgan brothers was not charged with anything because there was no evidence against her. Investigators have been using body-worn camera footage to piece together the sequence of events, which we just read to you since the Tribune article preceded what was reported today. Footage shows the three occupants were out or in the process of being taken out of the vehicle when Eric Morgan ran, leading one officer to chase and apprehend him nearby. Brown also provided a brief narrative of the confrontation that led to the shooting at the news conference, also describing a struggle between Amonte Morgan and the officers. The struggle went from the trunk of the car to near inside the car, not necessarily all the way inside, he said, and the shots rang out from the passenger seat of the car. Brown's demeanor turned to frustration, however, when asked about the dangers of sending young officers through reverse seniority to high-crime neighborhoods. French was 29 with just 3 years on the job, for instance. These two offenders killed Ella French and then tried to kill the second and third officers there, Brown said sternly. That's the only person we're pointing the finger at today. One person did this, not reverse seniority, not any other reasons for this person. Then this person killed her and tried to kill the other officers. And I won't entertain finger pointing, he continued, at anyone or anything else. Thank you, Kit. We're almost to the end of this. Over the weekend, Brown said a total of 38 Chicago police officers have been shot at or shot so far in 2021, 11 of whom had been struck by gunfire. The 11 includes French and her partner. For all of 2020, 79 Chicago cops were shot at or shot. Now, for, I guess, comparison, the weekend Chicago shooting stats, as reported, I believe, by ABC Chicago, there were 73 shot this weekend, 11 fatally. CPD says more than half during a 10-hour span that saw a police officer killed and 3 mass shootings that wounded 16 people. And I went and looked at where these other shootings took place at, in clubs, on corners. It was just, I don't know if it was the heat or it's out of control with everybody's access to illegal weapons. The mass shootings occurred about an hour apart in Gresham on the south side early Sunday, not long after the 2 Chicago police officers were shot during a traffic stop in West Englewood. The officers were taken to the University of Chicago Medical Center, while the wounded Morgan brother was taken to Advocate Christ Medical Center in Oak Lawn. He and one other male suspect were arrested, while a 20-year-old woman was taken into custody hours later, police officials said. French and her partner were members of the Community Safety Team, a citywide unit formed last summer under Brown to respond to criminal hotspots. Prior to Saturday night, the last line of duty deaths of Chicago cops who were killed while pursuing a suspect were in December of 2018, when officers Eduardo Marpline and Conrad Gary were fatally struck by a train as they looked for a man wanted for illegally possessing a gun. That suspect, Edward Brown, was sentenced earlier this year to 1 year in prison for a felony weapon violation in that case. The last female Chicago cop to be shot and killed in the line of duty was Irma Ruiz, who died in September of 1988 when she was shot inside an elementary school on the near west side. In the French shooting, records showed that Danzy bought the gun in March from a licensed dealer in Hammond, brought it across state lines, where he claimed to be buying the weapon for himself, according to the federal complaint filed Monday. ATF agents on Sunday tracked down Danzy at the restaurant where he works, and he agreed to be interviewed on tape in an agent's car in the parking lot. Agents showed him paperwork from the dealer, and at first he claimed to have bought the gun for himself, the complaint states, but after further questioning, he admitted that he instead had bought it for someone in Chicago. Individual A, who had a felony record and could not buy a gun for himself, who we've since identified as the shooter. Also Monday, Lightfoot's office addressed controversy that emerged from her visit to the hospital the officers were taken to Saturday night, where a group of police officers apparently turned their back on her. A source with knowledge of the incident said Lightfoot also was scolded by the father of the officer who was seriously wounded in the shooting. Lightfoot stood and listened in response, according to the source. Afterward, Lightfoot tried to approach a few dozen officers who walked away from her and kept their backs turned, the source said. The mayor then walked away, according to the source. Lightfoot's office released a statement Monday addressing the incident at the hospital by saying she was present at the emergency department to offer support and condolences to the families involved and the hundreds of line officers and exempts who were there, which she did. In a time of tragedy, emotions run high, and that is to be expected, the statement said. The mayor spoke to a range of officers that tragic night and sensed the overwhelming sentiment was about concern for their fallen colleagues. The mayor's office also said it's time for us to come together as a city. Now, where am I over here? These are the 2 shitheads, and I'm not going to leave them up very long, who shot Officer French. And in reviewing social media today, I came across a fantastic quote from David Earl Williams III, who is a frequent contributor to our Facebook Hard Lens media page, who said, and I quote him, "We know how this ends. They'll be made examples of. Lightfoot will be reelected because blaming her for any cop or civilian's deaths is just misplaced anger. The milking of the deceased officer from the media will wear off about a week from now. That and until some cop abuses their power again, dishonoring the fallen officer's name. It's tragic and much won't change really until the mayor, the cops, and community work together." And I want to add that, these 2 idiots just gave CPD, no pun intended, the ammunition to avoid responsibility and accountability for any future abuses, because it's going to make it harder now for all the communities with angry cops patrolling the streets. These guys may have just shot people in their own community because they've just basically made it worse for communities of color when you've got an angry police department and the ripple effect that this is all going to cause. Tragedy all around, Kit. Your thoughts?
Well, first,
where to start?
Yeah, where to start, and how to really contribute to this story that is something that we're all too familiar here with Chicago. Sadly, and here, hold on. Let's actually acknowledge somebody in the live stream. It's a shame people choose to be soldiers and some die while serving. Same for police and firefighter. Unfortunately, this is part of those jobs. Sad, all the same. Absolutely. And the thing is, condolences to the families. With all point of evidence, the video camera, the dash cam evidence shows that the cops did their job. That these two officers, one who is still fighting for their life, they did their job and
honorably. They did their job honorably.
The situation. And this is a situation where now this can be used as an example of, well, you always have to be on the go, ready to shoot. And how many times have we covered on Heartland's Media, or how many times have we seen on the Convo Couch, or Mikasu Kaso, or Fred Hampton Leftist, or Jimmy Dore Show, or Lee Camp, or anywhere else where cops are abusing their power and using excessive force? I don't know what this spells in the long run for the city of Chicago, what this means for Chicago Police Department interactions with people of different communities on the south and west side, or even on the north side. But the sad fact is that this summer heat wave, it's still happening. And right now, while we're still dealing with a thunderstorm.
Yeah, let me bring that up real quickly. Quick news alert.
Hold on. Wait. Let me just finish my thought here real quick. This thunderstorm that's happening outside could be an omen of things to come, because we don't know what's going to happen next. Because there's a lot of angry people out there. There's a lot of scared people out there. Now, does there need to be police reform? Oh, absolutely. Nationwide, we have seen abuse of police officers hurting people, innocent people. We've covered before in the past of a lot of these things before, but these two officers are one of the few examples of doing the right thing and what a lot of the activists have been asking for: de-escalation.
Yep.
They did their job, and these two young men who are now being held without bail, they systematically put everything backwards now. We're right back to square one.
Yep.
Because at the end of the day, what's going to matter? It's going to matter with those people who are in power, the politicians, and what corporate media also pulls out there to the people as well. So these next couple of weeks here in Chicago are going to be pretty dicey. So everyone just be careful out there, be safe out there. And we haven't seen the last of this, unfortunately. And I don't know how else we can end this, but just saying, please be safe. And that goes for everyone, officers included, because this is a boiling pot, and there's no way to stop it.
It's interesting also to see how the police department is dealing with Mayor Lightfoot, who I feel plays both sides of the. Both. I'm getting a little bit of an echo, Kidder. Okay.
Good.
Yeah, you've got Mayor Lightfoot playing both sides of the fence on this. She claims that she wants police reform, but then, she shows up at, to offer support, and the police don't want to have any of that. When it's like you can't have it both ways. I mean, we need a responsible police department, of which these officers were clearly demonstrating in action. This thin blue line's got to go away, and we've all got to be brought together. And that's what I think that David Earl Williams said. Again, quoting him, it's a tragic and much won't change really until the mayor, the cops, and the community work together. Everybody's working against each other right now. You've got the cops working against the community because of shitheads like these two and many more like them that are out there terrorizing not only the community, but the police who are out there who are supposed to be out there to provide protection for people. And then you've got an amped up police department who's just going to point to this and say, see, this is why we have to go into every situation with our hackles up, guns drawn, because we don't know what we're going into. And I think that there's just got to be, like a stand down between the community and between the police and the mayor too. We have to work together on this. I'd like to see I think that I don't know. I mean, in the light of this tragedy, I'm hoping things don't suddenly tilt towards, one step forward, two steps back, as far as
unfortunately, I think we are there.
Yeah, that's what's going to happen now.
And right now, and until there's actually real kind of dialogue between the communities, the CPD, the politicians, and how something can really be done so that everyone can at least do their jobs and live life here in the city as best they can. Unfortunately, this situation, it's still too hot. It's still too fresh and raw for many people. And, you know,
so Arturo Medina,
I just don't see how there could be any real positive conclusion to this, because right now we haven't seen the last of it.
Arturo Medina brings up a very good point in the live chat. Channel 2 did a report of many cops retiring early because they don't believe the city has their backs. I think the city would love to have their backs so long as they're held accountable for when they're not doing their jobs properly. And you know,
if you don't mind, let's look at a few examples of where, again, a lot of people in the city have raised their eyebrows and said a little bit more towards the CPD, such as the infamous black sites, where you have
Home and Square
tortured. Let's also bring up the fact that we covered this at Hardlands Media in 2017. 16 black men were exonerated from crimes they did not commit.
Yep.
And they were put in prison under false evidence, false charges by 4 Chicago police officers. And sadly, this is a story that's also all too familiar within our city, and that is corruption, political corruption, establishment corruption. And you have police corruption too. So the thing is, you know, while a lot of these police officers are retiring because they think the city doesn't have their back, remember, there's a lot of examples of the CPD clearly abusing its power to the point to where it is not protecting and serving.
And I want to say to our audience, you know, very honestly, Kit and I chatted before the show, how do we approach this? Because we want to honor this fallen officer who very bravely served and did her job honorably. By the same token, we were worried that people would perhaps respond negatively to us continuing to talk about the fact that despite the fact we're mourning this officer's passing, we can't suddenly toss accountability out the window in all of those examples that Kit just presented to us and shared with us. So
one more example too, the cover-up of the shooting and murder of Laquan McDonald.
Yes.
I mean, that's another example too, because the police report and what the video evidence shows, if you ever see the documentary 16 Shots, you'll see that there is a big difference between the police report of that accounting and the video evidence. So there we go. There's that too.
We know that there are good cops in the force in Chicago, but we also know that there is a culture in law enforcement and corruption that unfortunately probably reduces those good cops to like such a minuscule handful. And I've met some good cops. I met one officer who was involved in the Medicare for All March, and I had some conversations with him, and I was really impressed and heartened by the fact that he understands and hears a lot of what the community and what people are raising voices against, because he acknowledges there are problems within the department. A lot of this has to do with the unions and has a lot to do with the fact that the police union does not want to support that kind of accountability, because there is that weird line where too many officers don't feel that they're there to protect. They feel that they're there only to be to administer justice or be what's the word, to just be listened to or back down from. So
yeah. I think as a final note for this story, condolences to the family.
Yeah.
These 2 individuals who are now being held without bond need to definitely be held accountable for their actions and what happened. And everyone that's in the city, be safe.
Yeah.
Just
be careful out there. I mean,
this isn't over, unfortunately.
And people in communities too, they shouldn't have to do this, but what you're going to have to take extra care in any situation where you see police officers, because there's going to be a very heightened awareness. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of cops that are on edge. So as much as we hope the police will be focused more on de-escalating, we can't count on that right now. So I guess everybody's going to have to take an extra measure of precaution to de-escalate, or just try to like make sure to approach all situations where law enforcement might be, and as peacefully and as innocently as you can present yourselves.